Hello and welcome. This is a chat to the professional, the show that has been designed to x-ray the activities of professional individuals and corporate bodies. My name is Martin Sobu, and as usual, I'm glad to be with you. Today on a chat to the professional, we shall be having our own son, our own dear Bayo, Oyewole, who currently occupies the position of Principal Operating Officer, or rather Principal Operations Officer in charge of PPP Transaction Advisory at the International Finance Corporation. Of course, we've had Bayo on this show before, but today we shall be looking at something different. Don't forget, International Finance Corporation, IFC, is a subsidiary of the World Bank, and this interaction is actually taking place in Washington, D.C., at the IFC building. So don't go anywhere. By the time I return, I will probably be introducing Bayo and the topic of discussion for the day. Please stay. You're still watching the show, Chat to the Professional, and like I mentioned in my introduction, today we are having one of our own Bayo Oyewole. Of course, you know him too well. He's been on this show before. He is the Principal Operations Officer, PPP Transaction Advisory at the International Finance Corporation, a subsidiary of the World Bank. The last time I had him on this show, we talked about his sojourn to the United States, how he has found his job, of course, given his primary training in Nigeria before traveling abroad for greener pastures. 2 years have gone past, and I'm just wondering if between then and now there has been any change in terms of Nigerians' perception of Nigerians abroad. And that's essentially what we shall be focusing on today's interaction. So Bayo, once again, it's my pleasure to have you on the show today.
Thank you very much.
Now, 2 years down the line since we had our last interaction, I was just wondering if in your own views there have been some changes both at home and abroad in terms of the perception of our people and what they offer professionally in their respective areas of practice.
Well, it's interesting. The last couple of years have been quite eventful. I think that Nigerians feel quite bullish about Nigeria generally. It was interesting, following the Arab Spring, there was a similar event which was in the making over oil prices. Mm-hmm. Now, I think people kind of felt proud that Nigerians stood up to something that they believed in.
Yeah.
Not everybody here in this environment agreed with the position, but just the fact that that there was that kind of response, I think it made Nigerians here very proud of Nigerians back home.
That's good.
And I think that there's definitely a change. People are freer to express. Well, Nigerians have never been shrunk away from expressing themselves anyway. Mm-hmm. But I think that that now that it's even more the case. And there are many more outlets now. There's social media. There's all kinds of different things. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a very interesting development. Very, very encouraging development.
That's good. Impressive. You've been visiting Nigeria quite often these days, and I'm just wondering, shuttling between Washington, D.C. and Nigeria, what's going on?
Well, the nature of my work has changed a little bit. Right now, I work in a department, a very interesting department, which advises governments on structuring public-private partnerships, PPPs. Mm-hmm. And currently I'm working on 2 projects in Nigeria, one in Cross River State, a hospital PPP project, and potentially one in Ekiti State, which is still at a very early stage of discussion.
Well, that's exciting, because if we have our own supervising what's going on in our country, I think that's some sort of confidence on the part of our people back home. But apart from that, I want to know your job. Like you said, a couple of things have changed. And I'm wondering, outside this projects that you mentioned in Nigeria, do you have other key projects in Africa that you supervise directly?
Well, I mean, my work covers, all of Africa. It's just that currently, since I've just started working in this department, I'm working on 2 projects in Nigeria. But I expect to do much more outside Nigeria and also in other parts of the world as well.
Okay. Now, looking at our education system, it was one issue that we talked about the last time I had you on this show. You've been visiting home, back and forth. In your own opinion, are you seeing positive changes towards addressing those issues that were identified originally as negatively affecting our educational development?
Well, what I find that's interesting is that I think there's pretty much a loss of confidence in the traditional sort of government universities back home. And so people tend to be opting for more private universities within Nigeria, and a lot more people are leaving the country. They're going to England, they're going to the United States, they're going to Canada, they're going to Egypt and places like that. Ghana, so I think it's a shame that that we've sort of lost confidence in our own country's ability to establish good universities. And an interesting development which I've been following is the change of name in University of Lagos. So I think that sort of thing really, it may not seem important to some people, but when you have been to a university which has a proud name and then all of a sudden that name is lost, it's really difficult, especially when you go outside the country, to explain that you went to Oshuda University, because University of Lagos, it took decades. Exactly. Yeah,
but as far as that is concerned, I'm just wondering if it's about the name. Wouldn't it rather be better we concentrate on the products of that university? I mean, the products of UNILAG, for instance, in the 70s, 80s, and even perhaps early 90s, and the product of UNILAG as we speak, can you compare, these sets?
Well, it's I don't think you can really compare any of the universities today with the standards that they had before, which is a big shame.
So that's why I'm thinking that the name change is a political thing, and it's not something I personally would want to get into, because I think is a matter that is in the court as we speak. Some people are challenging the federal government, and I understand a bill has been sent to the National Assembly, for that change. How that plays out is another story. But I am more concerned on the content. The problem we have with our education system, is it about the structure or is it about the curricula? Because, I mean, globally, the world has become a global village, and I'm just wondering if our curricula is in tune with what goes on in other developed societies.
I think it goes beyond that. I think basically it's a matter of cash, really. If we were to allocate more resources to our universities and were to manage the resources properly, I'm sure that we could maintain very good universities. But the problem is it's really very expensive to run a university. In this country, for instance, an average private university costs tuition of about $50,000 a year. I don't know how much you pay in universities in Nigeria, but there's just no way that you can keep up if people are paying next to nothing for university education. When I went to university in Nigeria, I mean, I could have afforded to pay more because I come from a middle class family. I'm not from a rich family, but if the tuition had been, say, 5 times as much, I could have afforded it. But instead, I paid next to nothing for my education. So I think somehow you've got to find a way to at least charge more. I know that's a very unpopular position for many Nigerians.
I'm sure a lot of Nigerians out there would want to stone you even as they watch you on the screen.
But you see, the problem we have is that a lot of people see university education as an entitlement. I don't think it's an entitlement. I think people really need to decide whether it's something that that makes sense for them.
Yeah.
If it does make sense for them, if they feel that it's going to help them in their careers, then they need to make some sacrifice towards it. I'm not saying it should be, unaffordable, but I think people really need to recognize that that this is something that costs money, and therefore they need to appreciate it. And what we have found in our work here in the World Bank is that when you give out learning or training free of charge, it's not appreciated, it's not adopted.
Okay.
When you work, if you look at the people who leave Nigeria and come to the United States or go to England to get their education, they have to work hard to earn the money to pay for the education.
Okay.
They don't go on strike. They don't.
But we have such opportunities in Nigeria, because that's the issue. I mean, someone comes out from high school or secondary school, as they call it in Nigeria, and we have so many graduates roaming the street without jobs. So a high school graduate, do you see him earning a living from a job that can provide what he requires to go to the university, to pay the kind of money you spend here? $50,000 per annum, converted to Naira, that will give is about 7-point-something million per annum. I mean, how many families, both husband and wife combined together, are able to make 7.5 million?
Well, that's a much larger issue. That goes back to issues of the economy and so on. And that's the thing. You see, the thing about the problems in Nigeria is that you can't really address them piecemeal. I think they all have to be considered within the overall context of the economic environment.
Yeah.
So just to pick out education or tertiary education is really that's just a small part of our issues.
Okay. Well, for the past 10 minutes or thereabout, I've been discussing with Bayo Oyewole, and of course you know him very well, but we must take a short break now. By the time we return, we shall get into other specifics relating to his job at the World Bank. Please don't go away. You're welcome back. You're still watching A Chat to the Professional, the show that has been designed to x-ray the activities of professional individuals and corporate bodies. Before we went on the short break, my guest, Bayo Oyewole, the Principal Operations Officer, PPP Transactions Advisory at the International Finance Corporation, a subsidiary of the World Bank, of course our own Bayo, had tried to, in his own opinion, tell us why he thinks that university education is not doing very well. And like I also told him, I'm hoping that he doesn't find himself one day in Nigeria and get stoned for telling us that in America people pay $50,000 per session for university education, because it's a tall order in Nigeria as far as I am concerned, and we all know that. Be that as it may, of course, what the point he was trying to make, I'm sure, was the fact that whatever you do not pay for, you do not appreciate. So the more resources we plow into our education management, the better results we are going to get. Bayo, apart from your views about the cost of university education in Nigeria, do you think that generally we are getting it right with our education system? Of course, back in the days, I'm a product of a technical education, and I remember that before we left school, some corporations were already looking for us, with our City and Guilds trade test certificate and what they call the Federal Craft Certificate. And I'm wondering, wouldn't that be the best way to go? Because all these developed economies, looking at America for instance, I am sure that an average technician in America makes much more than a PhD holder in Nigeria. So what's your views on education system generally?
I think with every country there's got to be a balance of different sort of types of education. I think everyone needs to go through primary education. I think more and more, I think we all need to have secondary education. When it comes to tertiary, I think there are different options that are available and people should pursue. Traditionally, we've had this big focus on university degrees. They're not necessarily the most effective for nation building.
Yeah.
Very important to have lots of university graduates, but there's also a need for vocational training and for technical training.
Yeah.
I think if you look at many of the countries that are doing well today, many of them have developed technicians. You know, they focus on engineering. When you've actually achieved development, then you can start talking about
management
majoring in English and Chinese and other things. I'm not saying they're not important; these are very, very important. But I think for nation building, you really need to stress technology.
Yeah.
It's very important. It's what makes a difference these days, I think.
All right. With your experience in World Bank, for instance, I'm sure it's not in doubt where your opinion is coming from. Are you impressed, as it is, with Nigerian professionals working at the World Bank? I think Nigeria may have the greatest number of professionals in the World Bank in the entire continent of Africa. I may be wrong, but it amazes me that in almost every office you walk into in the World Bank and the subsidiary, organizations, you find Nigerians. What is it that makes Nigerians unique?
Well, the thing is that it's not just limited to the World Bank. I mean, everywhere you go, you come across Nigerians at every level. Sometimes they're in the background, making all the important decisions that you may not see. You see them in politics. You have mayors, you have all kinds of government people all over America who are Nigerian. Nigerians, I think, because we come from a very large country, we tend to be a bit more tenacious. Okay. We are aggressive in a good way.
So of course, it's the survival of the fittest.
Exactly. And we're also very street smart. And apart from that, we, many of us who benefited from the sort of earlier education were actually enjoying the fruit of that. And there are a lot of people who may have started off in maybe more sort of with more modest educational backgrounds, but were able to go somewhere else and improve on that. And we just have this natural eagerness, natural desire to learn. So we do well no matter what. There are people who haven't had good, a great education, but that eagerness combined with street smarts, somehow we get along. Plus, Nigerians tend not to see obstacles. I mean, you come to a country like this, and all you see is opportunity.
Opportunity, yeah, I agree with you. Well, I don't know how we can bring to bear these experiences that Nigerians all over the world have acquired into the governance of our country to make it as great as the individual citizens are outside the continent.
Well, I think it's a matter of time. I think what we're seeing now is that people aren't just accepting what they see. People are speaking out in different media, and I think that's a start. These things don't happen overnight. The history of this country, the US, over the past 200 years, is not that different. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that you had all kinds of things going on in places like Chicago and so on. So I think we need to be a little bit patient in that regard. It comes with education, it comes with exposure, and it comes with an increased demand for transparency. And we have some people who are going in the right direction, and inevitably some people who are going in the wrong direction. But in the long run, the more educated we are, the less we're going to stand up for things that we don't like.
Mediocrity. Well, I know that within the past few years, a couple of Nigerian professionals practicing abroad, have come home. And in some cases, you found these Nigerian professionals doing the wrong thing when they get home. Turning around, going against those values that sustain them where they were. What can we do to ensure that as you step into the country, which you call your own, you are going to import all those positive values that made you great where you're coming from, rather than come in and then you hear things like, if you can't beat them, you join them. Can't we continue to strive to beat them, to ensure that corruption and inefficiency is totally eliminated from the governance of not just Nigeria but the entire continent of Africa?
Well, that's a very tall. I've thought about the same thing myself, because I've had contemporaries who have done well here, and then they go back home, and they have they get tempted to do things that they shouldn't be doing.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think it's going to be it's a little bit more difficult than we imagine.
Mm-hmm.
But as time goes on, I think we're going to develop a critical mass of right-thinking Nigerians.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's when, and of course, when there's greater probity, when people know that they're going to get punished for doing the wrong thing, then things will change over time. I'm very confident that this isn't going to go on forever.
Well, I believe you've heard from the horse's mouth, as they say. Bayo Oyewole, who is the Principal Operations Officer in charge of PPP Transactions Advisory at the International Finance Corporation, a subsidiary of the World Bank, telling you what he thinks could be done to revive those values that made us the greatest in the entire continent of Africa, and of course to a very large extent that made us stand out in the crowd in the Committee of Nations. And so we are hoping that with the current campaign we are launching on A Chat to the Professional with the Professional Elite Club, that people like Bayo and other professionals who are practicing both at home and abroad will be able to synergize to ensure good governance, not just in Nigeria. Of course, this time around we are enlarging the scope to cover the entire continent of Africa. And by the special grace of God, I'm sure you'll be seeing more of the activities of this elite club. So that's the much time would permit on the interview segment. But as usual, not before our professional handshake, which is always a tradition and a privilege. We are hoping that soon, with the activities of the elite club, we'll be able to achieve some of those positive values that you've talked about today on the show. Don't go anywhere. I will take another short break and I'll be right back. Well, I'm afraid that's the much we can take on the show, A Chat to the Professional today. You heard me talk about the Professional Elite Club, and of course, in the coming weeks, we shall unfold to you what the activities of this club is about. It's an exclusive preserve of all those that have appeared on this show since November 7, 2000, when the program debuted on television. And so we are trying to see how we can synergize to bring about good governance in the entire continent of Africa. We are not restricting it to Nigeria, but of course, you know that Nigeria plays a critical role in the overall development of the African continent, being not just the largest black nation in the world, but of course, a major player economically. We are hoping that the vision of the federal government of Nigeria that seeks to achieve being amongst the biggest 20 economies by the year 2020 will be realized even before then, if only we can get things right, because we've got all it takes to achieve that. The younger ones, I'm sure you've also drawn some inspiration from him, and we are hoping that you too will come out of school to be like Bayo and other Nigerian professionals practicing abroad. Till next week when I come your way, all I can say is be in touch with us and make the show your number one, and we shall continue to serve you something refreshingly different. Till next week then, I'll see you.